This is one of the strangest things that has ever occurred to me. My family used to live in a remote area, at least an hour's drive from the nearest town, so traveling to see friends or family took a very long time. I had to stay home more often as a teenager because of schoolwork. Or at least that's what I used as an excuse to be home alone. It was late fall, and my parents and sister had gone to visit my aunt and uncle. Our house was on top of a hill, and it was a really beautiful place. The yard was enormous both in the front and back, but the front yard was much larger. I stayed home that time, but I don't remember doing any homework, so I guess it's not really important. The only thing, though, that we retained in the backyard was this old wooden shed that appeared to be older than the house. When we first moved in, there were also many really old tools, but we never actually utilized them for anything. We had a collie dog at the time, and I was sitting on the couch in the living room with him resting at my feet as I watched television. It was a bit after sunset at this point. However, at some point, the dog just suddenly perked up, which caught my attention right away because I assumed he must have heard something. He was also looking around nervously. After a few seconds, the dog got up and walked through the living room and into the kitchen, which was open to the backyard through sliding glass doors. I believed the puppy just needed to use the restroom outdoors, so I got up and went over to the sliding glass door, unlocked it, and let the dog out. The dog started barking right away, but it sounded quite threatening. So I shut the door and turned on the back porch light. The moment I did, however, the dog continued to bark and would not leave the porch. At first, I was unable to determine what the dog was barking at, but then I noticed the most terrifying thing I had ever witnessed. The door to the old shed swung open, and a huge man emerged from it carrying one of the old tools, a large pickaxe. I quickly pushed the door back open and rapidly called the dog back inside as the man stood there and observed us without moving. It took a while to get the dog back inside, but once he did, I quickly shut the door, even though I knew it was pointless to do so. I took the dog through the basement door, locked it, and we ran down the stairs. I started looking around to see if there was anything I could use as a weapon because I had no idea who the hell this guy was or why he was here. If the guy really wanted to get in and hurt me, a glass door wouldn't stop a pickaxe. I was in the middle of getting an old baseball bat when I realized that was the only weapon I could locate in the basement to defend myself. The sound of a smash coming from upstairs scared me since I knew there was a big man with a pickaxe inside my home. It sounded like he had broken down a conventional door, not the glass one. I tried to hide beneath the stairs with the dog and bat close by, but it didn't take long for him to move over to the basement door, where he started banging on it violently and eventually forced it open. I was terrified that he was going to come for me and murder me. I wasn't even able to respond. I simply cowered there with the dog. "You never saw me. Do you understand? Answer me, or I'm coming down there myself," he added in a loud, stern voice. "I know you're down there. The axe isn't for you," I yelled back at him. "I never saw you. I promise." And after a brief pause, he responded, "If you tell anyone they saw me, I'll come back for you." I sat in the basement with the dog for a while since I didn't want to go because I never saw anything. And I repeated that there was another calm moment. Good. "You better not forget it." I heard the man leave and open the sliding glass door. I had no idea if the man had actually left, if he would keep his word, or if he was just playing a practical joke on me, but I was terrified when I finally came up. There had been very little actual damage to the house, and it was clear that no one was still inside. I had initially considered calling 911, but I ultimately decided against it because I was too terrified to tell anyone about the man's threat. The house was damaged, so I couldn't keep it from my parents when they got home, but I didn't give them the best description either. As far as I know, nothing ever happened with that guy. There were no murders, break-ins, or anything else like that reported that I heard of. I don't know why that guy specifically wanted our pickaxe, and I can only hope that he learned something from it. I was traveling in my Mustang from Texas to Arizona to visit my brothers. I normally keep emergency supplies, such as water and tools, in the trunk. I was taking, I guess, what you might call a beautiful back route, since I enjoyed flying at high speeds with the top down without concern about other cars or pedestrians. I was speeding down this road when the car started making these unsettling popping noises from under the hood, and the car began to jolt or jump slightly. This was one of those completely deserted, appearing roads with one lane on either side and nothing but deserts, cacti, and shrubs as far as the eye could see. I slammed on the brakes hard to bring the automobile down from a speeding 90 miles per hour to a very abrupt stop. There was no smoke or anything like that when I stepped out of the car and popped the hood, but I tried to act as though I knew what to expect and how to go about fixing it. I have no idea what the issue might be. The automobile was a #1 Ford Mustang, so you can imagine that it was an old car with its fair share of issues when I got back in it to try to start it. Naturally, I tried to phone my roadside assistance provider, but when my father realized I didn't have any service so far out in the desert, I was essentially trapped, and I hadn't seen another car pass me for the entire hour I had been traveling on that route. He became more upset, and I was frightened to consider how long it would be before someone passed. My spirits were raised when I noticed a car driving down the road in the distance when I had been waiting on the side of the road for literally hours while sitting on my car's trunk. The automobile sped past me as I got out of the trunk, started to walk, and waved my arms in the air in an attempt to get it to stop. Total evil nightfall arrived. Hunger was setting in, and there had been no automobiles passing since the first. I was attempting to fill my stomach with the water bottles I had in my trunk. I didn't understand how someone could leave another person stranded like that. When I finally saw approaching headlights, I turned on my car's hazards but also waved my arms again. A truck pulled over and a man stepped out. I explained that my car had broken down and asked him if he knew anything about cars, but he didn't seem particularly interested in that. Instead, he seemed more interested in asking me if I was alone, where I was going, why I hadn't just called for help, and if anyone knew I was here. These inquiries he eventually offered to drive me, but if his intention was to make me feel uncomfortable, he succeeded. I climbed into his pickup truck and we set out. He warned that it would be a long time before either of us would have phone service. He then began grilling me with questions, such as why I would choose to have a background like this. After a few minutes, the truck slowed down. He stopped the car on the side of the road in the sand and said, "Oh no." The piece of crap broke down. This couldn't be happening. I turned to look at him and saw that he was still staring at me after about 5 seconds. He then asked me to raise the hood after he turned the latch. This entire issue is difficult for me to explain, but from the beginning until at this point, I was extremely suspicious. I approached his truck, leaving some space between us, and waited for the truck's hood to unlatch. In my head, I imagined him trying to run me over, and that's exactly what happened as I took one step closer to the truck to attempt to open the hood. I was about to lose my legs or be instantly killed when I heard the engine roar as the driver was on the gas. I took off sprinting into the pitch. Black night while turning back to see the taillights still in place when I heard what I believed to be bullets that were directed at me. That man was attempting to murder me, but it was too dark for him to shoot me dead without some sort of luck. I feared that I would perish at any minute, so I raced as far as I could to get as low to the ground as possible. The nightmare continued until early the next morning, when I woke up to another pickup truck passing by. I waved them down covered in sand and dirt, and thank God this man was actually normal. He and his wife gave me water and drove me to the nearest town, where I was able to call the towing company. I eventually fell asleep on the side of the road, and the nightmare didn't end until early the next morning, when I woke up to another pickup truck passing by. Long story short, this was the worst journey and experience of my life. Thinking that someone tried to run you over and then shoot at you isn't something you just get over. It took me 45 minutes to get back to my car on that goddamn road, and it took me the same amount of time to bring it into a shop.
When I was a junior in high school, my mother and I made the decision to go swimming one morning during summer vacation after my father left for work, and to visit my maternal grandmother, who lived in a rural location. Getting to my grandmother's house meant turning left, then driving for 5 minutes over a small, unpaved road that was only 1 car wide. When we got there, the unpaved road was lined by forests and rice fields. After greeting my grandmother, I went into my youngest uncle's room. I used to enjoy going to my grandma's house since my uncle was a major gamer, and his computer was much better than mine at home. So after making sure my uncle was at work, I turned on his and began playing Doom 3, which was previously a very popular game. After playing the game for an hour or so, my uncle left and didn't come back when he got there. They all drove to town at around 7 o'clock to do some food shopping because my grandmother asked him to do it since my mother, my aunt, and I were visiting her house. I was really excited and waved farewell to them because I don't think it is necessary to explain why. After enjoying approximately 90 minutes of free time, my uncle called to ask me to bring him a replacement tire that was in the storage shed, as I previously stated. He claimed he was about to turn left on the road, but one of the front wheels was punctured. After making that left turn, it took 5 minutes to drive through a small, unpaved, single-lane road to reach my grandmother's home, but it took 20 to 30 minutes to get there on foot. Looking back, I should have realized that it was quite scary to walk on that road, especially at night when there were no streetlights and rice fields and forests all around. Since it was around 9 p.m. and the region had already grown rather dark due to its rural location, I must admit that I was extremely frightened. However, since I didn't want anyone to think that I was a wimp, I decided to go. I took the tire, left the house, and began walking along the dirt road. I was a little glad to know that my uncle and family were on the other end of this road, but the night was dark. I could see my uncle beaming his car's headlights at me, which indicated that he was still fairly far away from me, and the headlights appeared like 2 enormous yellow spots. After about 20 minutes of walking, I recall being quite lightheaded. I looked in the direction of my uncle's car and knew I was getting close. Happier, I quickly rolled the tire. I hurried to hand the tire over to him as quickly as I could, but as I did, I noticed something in front of me that I couldn't immediately identify because it was still some distance away, but it was something dark. I felt strange and slowed down because I wanted to figure it out while there was still some distance, so I strained my head and neck to look carefully. Despite being terrified, I resumed my walk, thinking nothing would happen because my uncle and family were around 300 meters away, but as I drew nearer, it became too dark. I stopped when I could see clearly that it was an elderly woman crouching and gazing at the rice fields with her mouth open. I could only see the side of her face, but my whole body shuddered. I walked fairly near the elderly woman, and for reasons I don't understand, strolling past without saying anything felt even more rude now that her blank face with her mouth open was clearly apparent in the darkness. "Scarier," I cried. "Excuse me." But she just kept staring at the rice field and appeared to be on the edge of sobbing, so I continued speaking to her in a terrified voice. When she finally turned to face me, though it was dark, I could feel my heart clenching. The most terrifying aspects of her were the enormous wrinkles and stains covering her face, as well as her wide-open lips. I could clearly see she had scorched white hair, and I could only see the white parts of her eyes. I had eye contact with her, but was looking down while she was staring up at me. After a few seconds of eye contact, she shifted her body toward mine, giving me the strangest feeling like I was going insane. I initially believed she was seated, but then realized she only had a torso and head that were supported from the ground with 2 arms. A barrage of thoughts flashed through my mind, but I recall thinking, there is Satan right in front of me. I felt like she was going to run into me with her 2 arms if I didn't move, so I grabbed the tires of my arms and sprinted with my eyes closed tightly. Suddenly, I felt relieved that it was not Satan. My mother told me she was waiting for me in the car when she saw me sprinting with my head down, holding the tire in my arms, and suddenly falling off the road, causing my family to come out of the car in shock. After hearing what my mother had to say, I told my other family members what had happened while I was in my grandmother's room the following morning.